Hello, my name is Evan Harris, and I am an IT network specialist student at Mid-State Technical College. I will also be pursuing the cybersecurity path, and outside of Mid-State, I am pursuing a paralegal certificate. Today's topic, we are going to be navigating the digital maze and talking about the intersection of IT and cybersecurity law. Let's start with a scenario here. You're a network professional, or you work with a company that does a lot of networking, and you have a failure, and then you lose some data. That sounds pretty bad and is unfortunate, but can happen. Next thing you know, there's a fine of $20 million sitting on your doorstep. That sounds pretty unrealistic, but it's not a worst case scenario. It's the law under the GDPR, which governs data regulation. The modern network professional is a critical legal compliance officer whose configurations protect the company from legal and financial ruin, and by extension promote a positive customer experience by protecting the customer's data. The topics we're going to look at today, we're going to first look at the laws governing this section, we're going to look at the tech that's being used to implement it, and finally, we're going to talk about the forensic side of things. Let's start with the GDPR, which is our first legal framework that we're going to look at today. This is a European Union standard, and the long form of it is that it's the General Data Protection Regulation Act. These are the technical measures that companies must follow in order to protect consumer data. Consumers may see notices on this, however, it doesn't directly pertain to them as it doesn't fully define the consumer's rights. However, it does guarantee that confidentiality is ensured of customers' data. The GDPR demands integrity and confidentiality in processing data, and networks design must be built around a valid legal basis such as user consent. This is basic knowledge from Palo Alto, leader in firewalls and the leader in teaching this topic to other people. So moving from the corporate side, let's look at the consumer side, and more importantly, let's look at the state side. The CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, focuses on the consumers and their rights. It uses the same general framework as the GDPR, however, it adds extra focus on the right to delete and the right to opt out, which are two very critical rights for your data. If you delete an account or you see your information on the internet, you have the absolute right to request that information be deleted, and you also have the absolute right to opt out of any data collection. That's why we see a lot more pop-ups asking for consent, as that framework is what brings us these core rights. Let's talk about our second point here. These laws require privacy by design, meaning we must build the network for compliance from the start. You can't implement it later. That's why the GDPR does auditing, as it ensures that there's no half-baked attempts at applying the law. The network must enforce data minimization, which means we collect only what is strictly necessary. A lot of companies were capturing too much data, leading to some pretty severe lawsuits. And you can just see it in the news. You had Apple, Meta, Google, Instagram, TikTok, all were getting sued over data collection, and you saw the remedy to that was now more pop-ups asking you to give consent to your location, your data, your user information, and giving clear buttons to opt out. The change of technology is where the difficulty can occur, as technology is changing fast. Once upon a time, we didn't even use passwords. Then we started using passwords. Then we went to PINs. Now we're using biometrics and two-factor authentication codes, such as our Microsoft Authenticator that we all love when we have to try to get into a Mid-State email. The technology is outpacing the legal regulation as of right now, but it is important for the IT network professional to stay up to date on the technology, especially if the legal regulation starts to catch up. And according to researchers like Wild et al., Palo Alto, and Process Unity, it is catching up as the technology is slowly beginning to plateau while the legal framework is beginning to creep back up. It's important to emphasize encryption. That's the most important element here. You have to encrypt data in both directions, in transit and in rest, and it is no longer optional. It is a technical measure required to meet the legal burden of proof to pass an audit. And that is a basic foundation and is a core concept that the IT network professional must understand. We're going to quick talk about accountability and forensics. Going back to a data breach earlier, we have to look at how accountability is done, and that's through network forensics. We focus on collection here. My job then transitions to detective, well staying that compliance officer that we talked about earlier. That means we're securing traffic laws, with packet captures, firewall rules, and talking to legal departments for further steps. The complexity of modern networks shows that there needs to be a distributed architecture for cloud computing, and that can complicate when we have to gather evidence, as that means there's multiple stacks. That's detailed by Zine et al., and their research and criminology primarily focuses on cloud forensics. Many people can look at the Apple iCloud scandal where we had leaks of personal information, and it's hard to gather that information as it comes from so many different sources. We have to notify people. We need to be quick in notifying people and give timely notification. It is a legal requirement as it allows the consumer to properly act and secure their data. It also is important that it identifies the scope of the incident, as it can be what saves the company from additional fines. Transparency is always key. So let's look at beyond the wire here. Let's quick look at what we reviewed. First, we talked about the frameworks. We talked about the laws. We looked at some of the technology such as authenticator apps and two-factor codes, phone numbers, pins, passwords, and most importantly, looking at the basics of what accountability means. The IT professional is a critical compliance officer, and it is a duty that is beyond the function of the job. It requires you to always be up to date, and that is one of the things that I have to do in my job and have to work on expanding, is protecting that data and ensuring compliance in those departments. We have to prevent fraud, and we have to prevent penalties. That is the most important thing that we face as a society. The future of networking is ensuring the law, not just the data, flows correctly through our system, as that affects both the corporate world and especially the consumer world. I thank you all for your time. I hope you all learned something today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.